Mind giving me a hand with this?" The request drifted from the entrance, mixing authority with welcome. Thomas Avery shifted the packaged bedframe higher on his shoulder, perspiration catching the morning sun along his neck. Before him stood a woman, feet bare against weathered porch boards, screen door propped open with one palm, while the other cradled a pottery mug. She possessed youth and beauty in equal measure. Her sapphire sundress, cut short and skimming her thighs, embraced her figure in the early light. Delicate straps traced her shoulders, exposing sun-warmed skin. Auburn hair gathered loosely, wisps framing her face. She appeared effortlessly beautiful without trying to be. "Maya Williams?" His tone remained measured, controlled. A nod, followed by a knowing smile. "Unless you're hunting for another messy-haired woman with questionable morning attire before." 9. Thomas permitted himself a subtle grin. "Bedroom furniture delivery, first level." "Left-hand room," she responded, retreating into the corridor. "Mind the table lamp. I keep telling myself it belongs somewhere." Passing her, the soft material of her dress whispered against his forearm. Intentional or not, he couldn't say. He pressed forward without glancing back, though he sensed the shift in atmosphere. The corridor carried scents of spice and flowers. Jasmine, perhaps. Delicate yet inviting. The house felt hushed. Cardboard containers formed neat rows against walls, still sealed. A space caught between arrival and commitment. Thomas moved with deliberate care, spine erect, each motion calculated. He positioned the frame and springs in the bedroom corner wordlessly, tested for balance, then returned to the hallway. Maya stood against the doorway, coffee in hand, one ankle crossed behind the other, her blue fabric lifting just enough to suggest intention. "Is this routine for you?" she inquired. "Moving furniture," he answered. "No." Her voice carried playful notes. "Walking into a stranger's home and making bed assembly look like seduction?" He blinked deliberately. She broadened her smile. "Well, I'm grateful," she continued, softening. "Truthfully," she paused, letting her gaze settle on his features, "you match my preferences perfectly." The moment suspended between them. Thomas angled his head slightly, reading her expression. Not mocking, not careless, simply honest, a woman comfortable with her desires and unafraid to voice them. He released a slow breath. "Don't think I should respond to that," she shrugged lightly. "I'm not requesting a response. Just thought you deserved to know." Thomas remained motionless, fingers brushing his nape. "Always this straightforward?" "I lack patience for games," she stated, finishing her drink. "Existence is brief. Want some coffee?" He wavered. "It's quality brew," she added. "Local shop 2 blocks down. Dark roast, no sweetener." "Got another delivery in 15, he mentioned. She offered a half smile. "Your choice, but I craft an excellent second cup." He nodded once, neither agreement nor refusal. Turning to depart, she called after him. "Hey, your name?" He stopped at the top step. "Thomas. Thomas Avery." "Well, Thomas Avery," she said, eyes dancing with mischief. "If that bed frame creaks tonight, I'm phoning you." He chuckled quietly, shaking his head as he approached the van. Maya remained in the doorway, arms crossed, hip against the frame, watching his retreat. "Absolutely my type," she murmured. Just before the delivery truck disappeared around the bend, Thomas smiled privately, not from her beauty, but from her sincerity. 4 days elapsed before Thomas Avery found himself returning to Maya Williams' doorstep, though this visit brought no work order, no company vehicle, and no scheduled appointment. He stood at the base of her steps, toolkit gripped in one hand, the other smoothing his denim. The reason for his presence remained unclear. The official explanation was Maya's message left at the shop. "Hi, Thomas. The frame rattles when I move around. Perhaps I assembled it incorrectly. Figured I'd mention it before it gives way beneath me. But the genuine reason transcended carpentry." 2 knocks brought her to the door. This time she wore faded jeans and a loose charcoal shirt knotted at her waist. damp hair pushed back under, a towel wrap, cheeks flushed from a recent shower. "Look who showed up," she said, shoulder-finding the doorframe. "Didn't expect you'd actually appear." "You called," Thomas replied simply. "I also mentioned maybe," she teased. "But I'm certainly not disappointed." She stepped aside, waving him inside. Same location, still making noise. He entered without comment, though her fragrance, clean soap mixed with mint, lingered beyond expectation. The house showed more organization now. Several photographs hung properly, books arranged on temporary shelving. Soft music floated from a wireless speaker in the kitchen. Fleetwood Mac. He entered the bedroom and knelt beside the frame. Within moments he'd loosened the side panel and began securing bolts with practiced efficiency. Maya leaned in the doorway, arms folded. "Do you always repair problems that aren't yours?" Thomas kept working. "I dislike incomplete jobs." She observed, studying him. "You possess an old spirit. Perhaps. I'd guess someone raised you never to abandon work halfway done." He paused, then nodded slowly. "My mother and my commanding officer." "Military?" Her tone shifted slightly. "Army Corps of Engineers." 7 years. She fell quiet momentarily. "That explains your movement pattern, like you've already measured the world's weight before lifting anything." He tightened the final bolt and stood, wiping palms against his jeans. "You enjoy analyzing people, don't you?" "I enjoy discovering what people don't reveal." He faced her, arms relaxed at his sides, their eyes connected. "This wasn't actually about furniture, was it?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "Perhaps not." The space between them stretched again, charged yet different now. Gentler. She entered the room and settled lightly on the mattress edge. "Want coffee?" "This time. I'm not here for coffee." "I didn't claim that's all I'm offering." He raised an eyebrow. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya dissolved the tension with a grin. "Relax, Thomas. I'm not attempting seduction via espresso." "Yet." He chuckled, quiet and unexpected. She patted the space beside her. "Sit briefly. I don't bite." He hesitated, then sat. The bed barely, whispered. "I relocated here to forget someone," she said suddenly, voice softer. "Someone who made me feel I needed to diminish myself for love." Thomas remained silent, but his attention never left her face. "So when I encounter someone like you, someone who moves like he owes the world nothing, I pay attention." A lengthy pause. Then he said, "People only move that way after learning to lose." Maya looked at him then. Really looked. No flirtation, just presence. "You've lost someone?" "My mother to cancer. Part of myself in Afghanistan." The room stilled. Maya extended her hand, resting it on his. Barely a touch, yet it anchored between them. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. He nodded, rose slowly, and moved toward the exit. "I'll call if the bed rattles again," she said behind him, warmth in her voice. He paused at the threshold, glanced back. "You don't need to wait for noise," he said. Then he was gone. Maya sat there afterward, listening to his boots fade on the porch steps. She couldn't name what had passed between them, but she knew it wasn't insignificant. And Thomas, walking back toward the truck he'd parked 3 blocks away deliberately, felt the same unfamiliar stirring in his chest he hadn't experienced since deployment years ago. Hope, and the vulnerability that accompanied it. The late July sun had begun its descent, painting lengthy golden shadows across the peaceful neighborhood. Thomas Avery guided his truck onto a side street. Not her street, never directly, and cut the engine. He sat momentarily, gripping the wheel, questioning whether this qualified as a visit or something else entirely. He carried no tools. This wasn't a service call. He wasn't even certain she'd be home. But he exited anyway. Down the block, Maya Williams trimmed her hedge with shears clearly oversized for her small hands. She wore a weathered white tank, tan shorts, hair secured high with a crimson bandana catching loose strands. She didn't notice him initially, not until the gate squeaked. She looked up, eyes squinting against the amber light. Thomas. He nodded once. Evening. Don't tell me you're here checking furniture again, she teased. Nope. She set down the shears and wiped her forehead with her arms back. Then what brings me this honor? He shrugged. Happen to be nearby. Maya raised an eyebrow, smiling. You happened to be nearby 3 blocks over and decided to walk here in 90-degree heat. Something like that. She gestured toward the porch. Come on up. I made lemonade. It's homemade, I promise. He followed her up the steps. The porch had evolved since his first visit. Several potted plants, a new wind chime, a second chair added beside hers. She handed him a glass, their fingers touching. Still unsweetened, she said. You remembered. I remember everything you don't say, Maya replied. They sat silently for a minute, watching breeze stir through branches. Cicada song pulsed from deep in the yard. A dog barked 2 streets away. The quiet felt natural, not forced. I used to imagine this, Maya said eventually, voice softer now. Sitting like this with someone, no pressure, no explanations, just existing. Thomas sipped from his glass, then asked, Why didn't it happen before? She gazed toward the street. Because I kept selecting people who liked my concept, not my reality. He glanced at her. And what's the reality? She turned to him, unflinching. I'm complicated. Overthink. I feel intensely. I speak impulsively. And I don't apologize for wanting more than surface conversation. Thomas nodded slowly. Sounds genuine to me. She studied him momentarily like she wanted to say something deeper, then reconsidered. Instead, she asked, What about you? What's the part people don't see? He thought extensively. That I don't believe I deserve second chances. Maya didn't ask why. She simply placed her glass down and leaned forward slightly. You ever consider maybe the second chance appears when you're not searching? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he stood and walked toward the porch edge. The street stretched quiet and golden before them. You mind if I fix that loose gutter? He asked suddenly. She blinked. What? The one above your bedroom window. It's pulling from the corner. She laughed, a soft, surprised sound. You never stop, do you? I like when things stay secure. Well, she said, standing beside him, maybe not everything requires immediate fixing. He turned toward her. Their faces were inches apart. The air between them felt heavier than the heat. Still electric. Maybe, he said. Neither moved. But in that quiet moment, with the sky burning orange above them and the world holding its breath, something settled between them, unspoken, undeniable, and deeply real. Not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of something neither was ready to name. The restaurant wasn't impressive. Actually, it was the sort of place you'd overlook, unless seeking it specifically. Tucked between a coin laundry and second-hand bookshop just off King Street. Subdued lighting, red and white checkered table coverings. The aroma of garlic and melted cheese drifted from the visible kitchen, clinging to wooden beams like memory. Thomas had chosen it for its quietness, familiarity, safety. He occupied a corner table by the window, checking the door each time it groaned. He hadn't dressed specially, just a pressed button-down, well-fitted jeans, and boots polished enough to show effort, but his palms still felt damp, his heart beat, louder than usual. At 7:14 the door opened, and there she was. Maya Williams hadn't worn a dress this time. Instead, she had on high-waisted black denim and a silky emerald blouse tucked loosely, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hair was swept to one side in gentle waves, lips tinted just enough to say, I came intentionally. You clean up well, she said, sliding into the seat opposite him. Thomas gave her a slow smile. You too. They ordered pasta, hers with mushrooms, his with sausage, and shared a basket of garlic bread that vanished too quickly for politeness. The conversation began where most do: work, music, memories of awkward teenage years. But gradually, as plates emptied and wine softened edges, their words deepened. "I almost married someone like you once," Maya said, swirling her glass. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Like me, how?" "Quiet, steady, always repairing things that weren't his responsibility." She looked at him. But he wasn't truthful. Not with me, not with himself. He set down his fork. "And you think I'm different?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But you don't pretend. That's uncommon." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've had enough deception in my life to know I don't want to carry more." Maya leaned forward, resting her chin lightly on her knuckles. "What do you carry now?" Thomas looked away momentarily, as if measuring how much to reveal. Then he said softly, "My mother's voice. Every time I consider quitting, every time I walk away from something good because I fear it won't last." Her expression changed. Not pity, but something closer to recognition. "I carry things too," she said. "Regret, shame, guilt I shouldn't bear. You ever put any of it down?" "Not until recently," she whispered. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand filling. When they stepped into the night, the air was cool and dry. The city hummed in the distance, but their street was calm. They walked side by side, unhurried. At the corner where they'd have to separate, Maya stopped. "Tonight exceeded my expectations," she said. Thomas looked at her, the street lamp catching, the sparkle in her eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said, "even if I almost didn't." She smiled. "I didn't say that." He paused, then asked gently, "So what now?" Maya hesitated, then reached out and lightly touched his forearm. "You walk me home," she said. "That's what happens now." And so he did, not with his usual careful steps, but with quiet certainty. Neither spoke another word. They didn't need to. The porch light was illuminated. It always was now, soft, amber, and constant, like a silent invitation. Only one man seemed to respond. Thomas stood outside Maya's front door just after 9, one hand holding a brown paper bag of leftover cornbread he'd baked, another habit he rarely shared. He didn't knock immediately. He simply looked up at the light, that one familiar glow in a world that often felt too dim. Then the door opened before he could raise his hand. "You're always this quiet before visiting?" Maya asked, leaning against the frame, barefoot, wearing an oversized navy hoodie that barely reached her thigh tops. Thomas gave a small smile. "Wasn't sure if I should knock." "You should always knock," she said. "But you don't have to wait for me to answer." He stepped inside, and she gently closed the door behind him. The living room was warm, lights dimmed, a candle flickering on the coffee table. The couch had a folded blanket, 2 mugs already waiting, and the faint sound of Nina Simone's voice drifting from the corner speaker. "I want a little sugar in my bowl." "You're creating atmosphere," Thomas said. "I'm creating comfort," she replied. "Atmosphere comes later." They sat close, not quite touching. She reached for the cornbread bag and inhaled dramatically. "You made this?" "I experiment with things." "You surprise me," he looked at her. "You say that like it's positive." "It is. Most men my age don't cook, let alone bring baked goods that smell like they belong on someone's grandmother's Sunday table." Thomas laughed, a real, full laugh. Maya rested her head back on the couch, eyes half closed. "You know what I appreciate about you?" she said. He glanced over. "What?" "You don't chase anything. Not praise, not attention. You just appear and remain." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for his mug and took a slow sip, then gently. "You make it easy to remain." They didn't kiss. Not then. Instead, they talked about childhood, fears, favorite films, dreams that never made it past paper. At one point she pulled her knees up under the blanket and tucked her legs close to his, brushing against him like a question she was too cautious to ask aloud. It was nearly midnight, when the power flickered briefly and returned. "Old wiring," Maya said. "This house is like me, a little weathered but still standing." Thomas turned to her. "No," he said quietly. "You're not weathered. You're layered." That was the moment. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just honest. Maya's eyes softened. She reached across and placed her hand gently on his chest, right over his heart. "Stay tonight," she whispered. His breath caught, not from desire, but from the weight of what those words meant. "I don't want to ruin this," he said. "Then don't." He stayed. They fell asleep on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting lightly over hers. Outside, the porch light remained on, just in case. By morning, the room's stillness was broken only by the distant hum of lawn sprinklers and the soft creak of wood as the house breathed around them. Maya stirred first, blinking into the filtered sunlight that slipped through linen curtains. Her head was tucked beneath Thomas's chin, her fingers still resting on his chest like they'd never left. He was warm, still, steady. She didn't move. She didn't want to. Eventually, Thomas opened his eyes and let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. "Didn't dream," he said quietly. "That's unusual?" He nodded. "Most nights it's sand and gunfire. Last night it was just music." Maya smiled, tracing small circles on his shirt with her finger. "Well, I'll take that as a victory." They didn't speak for a while. There was no rush, no reason to hurry what had already begun to grow slowly, carefully, like something planted deep and allowed to stretch toward light on its own terms. But the world doesn't always wait for permission. At 9:07 a.m., the doorbell rang. Maya sat up, startled. "I'm not expecting anyone." Thomas shifted upright, already slipping his boots back on. "You want me to—" "No," she said, already heading toward the door, pulling on a robe as she went. Through the frosted glass she saw a familiar silhouette. Mrs. Kendall from 2 doors down, 80 if she was a day, with opinions like concrete, and a voice that could carry through brick. Maya opened the door only halfway. "Morning, Mrs. Kendall." The older woman didn't smile. She peered inside with sharp eyes, taking in the blanket on the couch, the mugs, the unmistakable second pair of boots. "I saw a man leaving here late last week," she said flatly. "And now again. That's becoming quite the pattern, isn't it?" Maya kept her face calm, neutral. "Is there something you needed?" "Just looking out for the neighborhood. Not judging," Mrs. Kendall added, the way only someone clearly judging would. Behind her, Thomas stood quietly in the hallway, arms folded. He heard every word. Maya straightened. "I appreciate your concern, but I think I can manage my own life," she said, her voice cool but not impolite. Mrs. Kendall's lips tightened. "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." Maya didn't answer. She just closed the door slowly, deliberately. When she turned around, Thomas was already gathering his things. "You don't have to go," she said. "I know," he replied, slipping his jacket over one arm. "But maybe today you need quiet." Maya stepped forward, stopping him with a hand on his arm. "She doesn't speak for me." "I know," he repeated, but his voice was softer now, wary. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "The looks, the questions?" Thomas didn't answer. Immediately. Then, "Only when I feel like I'm making your life harder." "You're not," she said firmly. "You're making it real." He looked down at her hand on his forearm, then met her eyes. "I'll come by tomorrow, if the porch light's on." Maya nodded. "It'll be on," she whispered, and as he walked away she stood behind the glass, watching him. Tall, composed, quietly carrying more than he ever said aloud. She didn't move until he turned the corner and was gone. Then she walked to the porch, unscrewed the light bulb, and replaced it with a brighter one. 2 days passed. No texts, no calls, just quiet. Maya kept the porch light on both nights like she said she would. But the third evening, as the sky turned from blush to violet, she stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at a stubborn jar of marinara sauce, and thinking about the one man she wanted to open it. Not just the jar, her silence, her frustration, the ache she didn't know how to name. The jar wouldn't budge. She tapped it gently on the counter, then laughed at herself. Dry, sharp, sad. Fine, she muttered, walking toward the front door. She didn't text. She didn't knock. She just walked 3 blocks in the muggy Charleston heat, still wearing her loose tank top and yoga pants, hair piled into a bun, a jar of tomato sauce clutched, like some ironic olive branch. Thomas's truck was in the drive. She climbed the porch steps and rang the bell. The door opened slower than usual, and for a moment she wondered if he'd hesitate. He didn't. He looked like he hadn't shaved, shirt wrinkled, the faint smell of sawdust and old sweat trailing behind him. "I need you," she said, holding up the jar like a white flag. "This thing won't open, and it's threatening my entire dinner." Thomas stared at her. Then the jar, then her again. "Seriously?" he said. "Very." He stepped aside without a word. She walked. Inside the place was sparse but clean. A stack of lumber leaned against the wall near the door. The living room was simple, neutral couch, no clutter, a military-style duffel bag tucked neatly beneath the coffee table. She noticed that. She noticed everything. He took the jar from her hand, gave it a twist. Nothing. Maya crossed her arms, grinning. "Well, well. Maybe you're not the hero I thought you were." Thomas narrowed his eyes, gripped the lid tighter, then let out a grunt as the seal cracked with a satisfying pop. He handed it back wordlessly. She lifted it like a trophy. "I stand corrected." They both laughed, really laughed, that warm, belly-deep kind that feels like it rinses you from the inside out. "Stay for dinner," she said between chuckles. He tilted his head. "Is that a thank you or a bribe?" "It's pasta and wine. You decide." He hesitated, then nodded once. "All right." They walked back together. No talk about Mrs. Kendall, no tension, just a jar, a joke, and 2 people who realized sometimes healing doesn't come with candles and music. Sometimes it walks beside you with tomato sauce in hand and a stubborn refusal to disappear. That night, they ate spaghetti on her back porch, under a strand of crooked string lights. Maya told a story about a college roommate who tried to climb into the wrong dorm window after one too many drinks. Thomas told her about his first job at 16, hauling bricks in the summer heat with a foreman who never smiled once. At some point, she leaned her head against his shoulder. At another, his hand found hers and didn't let go. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Later, when he stood to leave, Maya walked him to the gate. "You coming by tomorrow?" she asked. He paused. "Oh, you going to need help opening dessert?" She smiled. "Maybe, but I might need help finishing it." And for the first time in a long time, Thomas kissed her. Not rushed, not cautious, just right. It was Maya who pulled away first. The kiss had been soft, slow, the kind that lingered even after lips parted. And when she stepped back, her hand still resting on Thomas's chest, she didn't speak right away. Neither did he. She just looked up at him, breathing in the moment, memorizing the steadiness in his eyes. "Now what?" she whispered. Thomas didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was full, alive. Then, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back. "I'll come by in the morning," he said. "You still owe me dessert." But he didn't show up. Not the next morning, not the one after that. By the 3rd day, the porch light was still on, but the sun had risen and set without a trace of him. Maya didn't call, didn't text, but every time a truck passed the house, her shoulders stiffened, only to fall again in quiet disappointment. That Friday afternoon, she walked into the small hardware store near downtown, where he'd once mentioned working weekends. She asked for him casually. The man behind the counter looked up from a clipboard. "Thomas?" "Took some personal time. Left town, said he'd be gone a while." Maya managed a polite nod, then turned and walked out, her chest hollow. Gone a while. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That night she sat alone on the porch swing, blanket over her knees, the plate of leftover lemon pie untouched beside her. The lights along the porch railing flickered softly. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rang faintly, like memories refusing to be quiet. When her phone buzzed, she didn't move at first, but the name on the screen stopped her breath. Thomas Avery. No words, just a voice memo. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then tapped play. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of me. I told myself I wouldn't mess this up, but I could feel myself starting to. You made me feel like I could be more than what I've always been, like I could be seen without the armor, and that scared the hell out of me. I'll be back, Maya, if you'll still have me. If the light's still on. The message ended. Maya closed her eyes, then stood. She walked to the front of the house, unscrewed the porch light bulb, and replaced it with a brighter, newer one that wouldn't flicker. She didn't know when he'd return, but she knew this. Some goodbyes weren't meant to be finished. Some stories waited quietly, patiently, right at the edge of forgiveness. It was a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the message. The air was crisp with the first breath of fall, the kind of morning that made coffee taste sharper and silence feel heavier. Maya stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the microwave door while her tea steeped, counting seconds not to keep time, but to ground herself. She hadn't heard anything since that voice memo. No calls, no texts, no knocks, but the porch light stayed on every night. Every single night. That morning, as she opened the curtain, something unfamiliar interrupted the usual rhythm of her breath. A shadow. Not imagined, not hoped for, real. A man was standing at the gate, same build, same boots, same worn denim jacket he always wore when he didn't know how to dress for in-between seasons. Her fingers curled tightly into the fabric of the curtain before she let it fall back into place. She didn't rush. She walked, slowly, every step down the hallway echoing the weight of those weeks. When she opened the door, Thomas Avery didn't speak, not at first. He just looked at her like someone who'd memorized a place and still couldn't believe it hadn't changed. I didn't want to ring the bell, he said, voice low. Maya leaned her shoulder into the doorframe, eyes unreadable. Where were you? Gone. I needed to get out of my own way, he said. I was afraid of letting you see too much. You already did, she replied. That's why I missed you. His jaw tightened, and for a brief second she thought he might turn around, but he didn't. He stepped forward, not in bravado, not in apology, but in truth. I'm not perfect, Maya. I might never stop needing to step away when things get too close. She studied him for a long moment. I don't need perfect, she said. I need present. He nodded, swallowing hard. I want to be. There was silence. Then Maya turned halfway, opened the door wider. Then come in, she said softly. Before the light burns out. Thomas stepped inside. The warmth of the hallway wrapped around him, faintly smelling of cinnamon and something new. He noticed the jar of unopened jelly on the counter, waiting. She closed the door behind him, not with a slam, but with a quiet certainty. They didn't kiss. Not yet. Instead, they sat on the porch swing like they had that first real night. 2 mugs, 1 blanket, her head against his shoulder. The street was empty, the air steady, above them, the porch light glowed. Steady, unblinking, because some things, once left on, are never meant to go out.